Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to another episode of In the Frame. Today we're going to have a look at Indicator's spooky October releases, which are out on the 28th of October in the UK if you don't pre-order from Indicator. So we have the El Vampiro set, which is the first two Mexican vampire films directed by Fernando Mendez, and we also have Columbia Horror, which is 6 films, strangely enough from Colombia, from 1932 to 1944. One of these is a must purchase, I would say, if you're into these kind of films. And the other one you could probably wait for a sale. The films are all fun, but certainly none of them are great, but they all have their merits, put it this way. So we'll start with Columbia Horror, which is 6 films and lots of lovely special features. So this is spine number 394, 395 and 396. If anybody's counting at home. So again, you get a luscious booklet talking about all the films with lovely imagery from the films. So you get 2 films on a single disc. So we have 394, which is Behind the Mask, with Jack Holt and Boris Karloff, Constance Cummings. And then we have Jack Holt and Black Moon with Fay Wray, a brunette Fay Wray, which I have to say she looks more striking as a dark-haired woman than the blonde from King Kong. Black Moon is also available in imprint in Australia. And then we have 395, which is Airhawks, with the wonderful Ralph Bellamy, and Island of Doomed Men with Peter Lorre, and finally spine 396 we have Cry of the Werewolf and The Soul of a Monster. Now the first thing you might even realise just by going through the titles is the term horror is perhaps a little stretched thin in some of these films. Obviously everybody has a different idea of what horror is, but we'll start from 1932 and Behind the Mask with Jack Holt, who's somewhat of a forgotten leading man, but I would say for good reason. He is a bit stiff, and Boris Karloff, who, despite that cover, isn't the evil mastermind. Spoiler alert. He's just a sidekick of the evil mastermind. And Jack Holt is the government agent trying to find out who Mr. X is, the leader of this crime syndicate. Again, is it horror? Not really. They're obviously going on Karloff's image, because it does say who is the murdering monster, but spoiler alert, there isn't actually a monster in the film. It's just human monsters murdering people. So immediately you can say, well, that's not really a horror film, so why is it in Columbia Horror? But it's an efficient little thriller. I mean, all these films are short. I don't think any of them go past 75 minutes, and a lot of them don't reach 70 minutes. But again, it's wonderful seeing these films from this time period, because then you watch or you think about the bloated 2.5 hour, 3 hour films that we're used to nowadays, and it's like, why have you got to have 3 hours? These are programmed quickies, but they're really effective. Lots of wonderful character actors that you'll recognise, and Karloff is really good in this one, just playing a mobster basically. So that's fun, but again, it's kind of solid and fairly unremarkable. Black Moon is more interesting. This has sort of I Walked with a Zombie, Jacques Tourneur vibes, even though it was 9 years earlier than the Tourneur film. So this again stars Jack Holt, and it's about Caribbean witchcraft, when somebody's wife gets involved in a cult, and Fairy and Jack Holt end up going, and Jack Holt and the woman who's caught in the cult's daughter, who at one point is going to end up being sacrificed. So it's moody and atmospheric, not quite to the level of I Walked with a Zombie, which coincidentally recently got a Criterion release along with The Seventh Victim, which of course I picked up. But again, it's lots of fun, but you can see why maybe Jack Holt has been kind of forgotten as a leading man, because he is kind of very stiff in his line deliveries. There's not too much emotion going on. He's more kind of a 30s man's man. God forbid he emotes a little bit. But again, both of these films are pleasant enough, but again, they're kind of 3-star films. But I'm guessing some people might be a little bit more harsh than that. The special features, there's a tinted and a black and white presentation of Black Moon. I watched the tinted version, so for night you get a different colour, and which at least kind of makes it more interesting. There's a commentary on Behind the Mask with filmmaker and film historian Daniel Kremer from 2024, and there's a commentary on Black Moon with Stephen Jones and Kim Newman, who pair up quite a lot in boutique label commentaries, as you know, from 2024. And there's A Gentleman of Leisure from 2024, which is an 11-minute piece by Sheldon Hall assessing the career of Jack Holt, the forgotten star of Behind the Mask and Black Moon. And then from 1997 there's a 69-minute audio interview with Constance Cummings, made as part of the British Entertainment History Project, of Behind the Mask actor in conversation with Roy Fowler, and there's image galleries, and again in the booklet we find out about the production, etc. Then we have Airhawks with the wonderful Ralph Bellamy. I don't know about you, but probably the first time I came across Ralph Bellamy was in Trading Places in the 80s. He was born in 1904, so Airhawks in 1935, so he's 31 at this point. He's a dashing young man. Again, is this a horror film? Probably not. He runs a independent mail flying service, as in the post, not men being flown around the country. And of course he's going up against this big, powerful, nasty company that want to put him out of business, and bizarrely they use this mad scientist who produces a laser that blows Ralph Bellamy's planes out of the sky. So strangely enough, Ralph Bellamy's under pressure as the media and pretty much everybody is saying his planes are useless and they're death traps, before Ralph Bellamy investigates and finds out the real reason. You gotta love these original posters, marked for death because they ride the skies in defiance of the murder beam. It is one of the more bizarre plots. This is from 1935. Again, you'll have faces that you kind of recognise, but there's no way you would be able to remember their names. But Ralph Bellamy makes a dashing hero, and despite its distinctly loopy plot, it's very enjoyable. And then we have one of the standouts, Peter Lorre in Island of Doomed Men. I mean, this is absolutely wonderful, pretty much because of Peter Lorre. There he is. So again, this one's a fairly loopy plot as well. He owns a small island that is still under United States jurisdiction, but it's so small nobody cares about it, apparently. But he gets convicts to help the burden of the prison system. He gets convicts to theoretically, work for him and pay their way to society, but in actual fact it's just a slave labour camp to get diamonds for him. And nobody seems to question this, but so a government agent, played by Robert Wilcox, again another actor you've never heard of but probably was big in the 30s and 40s. He goes undercover. Somebody murders his agent that he was supposed to meet to get information about Peter Lorre, and then the police frame him, and conveniently he just goes to death row and not the chair, because he just refuses to answer questions about the murder. And eventually Peter Lorre gets him onto his island, but Peter Lorre seems to have more information and thinks he knows that he's a government agent. Throw in Lorre's trophy wife, who hates him and was fooled into coming to his island with him. Again, lots of character actors you'll recognise. There's a big electric fence around Peter Lorre's house. But the reason the film is so good is Peter Lorre. I mean, his performance is absolutely brilliant. He's playing this. Obviously, Peter Lorre was a small man. He has a crew of maybe only about 4 or 5 guards, and about 20 or 30 prisoners. He just exudes this threat, even though he's a small man. Again, there's no histrionics and chewing scenery. His delivery is always very measured, but every word that comes across as a threat. He only gets upset when one of the characters brings his monkey into the house, his chef. There's great lines about how many times I've told you I don't want that monkey in the house. But Lorre is just off the charts here. He's just so good, because even though he's playing this villainous character, he is actually quite a sad little man, even though he's got this power, because he wants all the diamonds of this island. And again, of course, the actual authorities and justice system don't really seem to care. So there's lots of chases and backstabbing, literally, and monkey action and people swapping sides, and it's just a lot of fun. This is one of the highlights of the set. But again, if Peter Lorre wasn't in it, perhaps not, but you just can't take your eyes off him because he's just so good in it. So this one has a commentary on Airhawks with film historian Jeremy Arnold from 2024. We have a commentary of Island of Doomed Men with film historians Alexander Heller-Nicholas and Josh Nelson from 2024. Darkness of the Morbid Brain which is a wonderful piece by Jonathan Rigby from 2024, which is 17 minutes. Jonathan Rigby, of course, does a lot of this and does great work, and this is a look at Peter Lorre. New York to Berlin in 26 hours is a 2-minute piece from 1933, which is a newsreel footage of aviator Wiley Post, who plays himself in Airhawks, and again, image gallery. Yeah, but again, are these films horror films? Probably not. Again, the poster for Island of Doomed Men is fantastic. Women shuddering at his cruel caress, men dying under his torturing lash. Again, horror films? Not really, but we'll go with it anyway. And then finally, from 1944, we have Cry of the Werewolf and The Soul of a Monster. So Cry of the Werewolf, again, is a wonderful little film, strangely enough, about a werewolf. And yes, they have similar problems to The Beast Must Die as far as the werewolf, but it's an effective little mystery about curses and a specific tribe of gypsies. It has also that influence by cat people. There's no getting away with that, but again, it's got a lot of appeal, and it's a good, cracking 63 minutes long. But all these feel, in a good way, longer than their short running times. Personally, I was never bored, even if some of them are, just kind of solid little films. But then the other one that's really good is The Soul of a Monster. Now this stars a young George Macready, who again, for me, probably the first time I saw him was in Paths of Glory, with that famous scar which he has in this in 1944. And this is wonderful. He plays a doctor who's dying, and his wife, there's a character who's religious, and he's obviously saying, just let God pray for him, and the wife just goes in a wonderful anti-religion rant, which is very enjoyable. It's basically, what good are your prayers? Nothing's changed then there, and 80 years later, but they're standing in front of a fire, so she asks the person downstairs to help, because if God can't help, you might as well ask the devil for help. And then this amazing looking woman just appears in the street with an amazing hairdo that you have to see. You have to see it. It's an incredible hairdo. She gets hit by a car, but doesn't seem to take any damage. And then she just turns up and says to the wife, "You called for me," and the wife is obviously confused. And she brings the husband, George Macready, back to life. Or does she? Is he living or is he dead? What in the world is going on? So she nurses him back to health, but at what cost? As the poster says, she was married to a walking dead man. She kissed his lips and they were cold. She touched his wrist, there was no pulse. She scratched his arm, there was no blood. Columbia's The Soul of a Monster. It's a cracking little film. I should say all these films look amazing. The restorations are picture perfect for films like, they're 80 and 90 years old. George Macready's fantastic in it. Again, you just can't take your eyes off him. He's got that great voice, even when he was younger. He was young once. Yeah, Soul of a Monster and Island of Doomed Men are the kind of standouts in this set. but the rest of them you'll get some enjoyment out of them if you are of a certain mentality. So there's an audio commentary on Cry of the Werewolf by Elios Ross from 2024, and there's a commentary on The Soul of the Monster with Stephen Jones and Kim Newman, which I haven't listened to, but I'll probably listen to them very shortly, because again, these films, well, these two are 63 and 62 minutes, but again, The Soul of a Monster feels longer than 62 minutes, but in a good way. So you do get character stuff, it's not just like whiz bang, that's the end of the film. Casting Shadows from 2024, it's just 21 minutes long. Archivist Tom Vincent provides an overview of the award-winning career of profile cinematographer, prolific cinematographer here in Burnett Guffey. Don't Kill Your Friends from 1943, which is always good advice, which is 14 minutes, which is a World War II short film featuring Cry of the Werewolf star Nina Foch and his image galleries. So they're stacked with extras. Two of them are excellent, I would say. The other four are certainly enjoyable, but probably solid. So would I say rush out and buy it? I mean, because it has the word horror in it, it may sell out relatively quickly. I got number 30 of 6,000, but there's 6,000 of them. I would be tempted to wait for a sale, unless, you know, as I do, I just love films from this period. But again, as I said, are they all horror films in the broad sense? Probably even not really. They're all Region B. But again, wonderful restorations, and if you love your stars like Bellamy and Macready and Peter Lorre, or even Jack Holt, you'll get a lot of pleasure. Now, moving on to the one that I would say is essential if you like this kind of thing, and I would probably say this one will probably sell out quicker. Again, it's 6,000 copies, but this is El Vampiro, the first two vampire films from Mexico. I had El Vampiro on DVD. I think I did a random review of this a while ago, but it's great to see it on Blu-ray because both of these look stunning. This is A, B and C region, so you can watch this wherever you are. El Vampiro is from 1957, so a year before Hammer's Dracula, and The Vampire's Coffin is 1958. So it's unusual that the first two films in this series, the sequel actually has 4 returning actors playing the same characters, because it literally just picks up where the first one finished, which is really nice. You know, because a lot of the time, even when that happens, you don't get the same actors, so you don't really feel that consistency, but you can just watch these back to back and it's just like one wonderful story. So again, you get a wonderful booklet. Again, both films directed by Fernando Mendes. And you get wonderful stills in the booklet. So also Indicator have released some Mexican horror films before in the Mexico Macabre set, which for me is probably now in the top 5 of Indicator box sets. This is absolutely sensational. So Mendes directed The Black Pit of Dr. M, which is one of the films on this, which is essential. I'm not sure this is actually sold out now. So each film, unlike the Columbia Horror, gets its own disc. This is El Vampiro from 57. And both of these are just absolutely wonderful films. The cinematography, the atmosphere. There's a Bava Black Sunday, which again was after these films. There's always fog in the air and mist in the air. Shot composition's absolutely exquisite. There's a dreamlike element to certainly the first one, a little bit less than the second one. Great performances, a little bit of humour, but just tremendous stuff. As I say, trapped on the strange bridge between the end of life and the beginning of death. These are both 4K. Sorry, this one's a 4K restoration. The sequel's a 2K. Looks, as I said, looks absolutely exquisite. They both have an English mono, but obviously I didn't go anywhere near that, so they are Spanish with subtitles. There's a commentary with lead actor Germain Robles, who plays the vampire. The Mark of Abel in 2024, which is 22 minutes. Sisters Claudia Salazar Arenas and Rosa Salazar Arenas share personal stories about their father, the legendary actor, producer and director Abel Salazar. Who's Afraid of Carmen Montejo from 2024, which is 30 minutes long, which is film programmer, curator and Mexican horror cinema expert Abraham Castillo Flores examines the life and career of Cuban-born radio stage and screen actor Carmen Montejo from the Mexican Film Archive, and he's got a bust of the actress behind him because she is absolutely striking in this film. So the film itself is about a niece who comes to this strange little village where an old house is in ruin. I've heard that before. Belonging to a family, and one of her aunts has just been buried, and her other aunt, played by Carmen Montejo, looking very striking. You can kind of tell there's maybe something a little bit vampish about her. She just turns up. She also meets Abel Salazar at the station, and he comes along for the ride. He's going somewhere else, but he just wants somewhere to stay, and all manner of strange things start happening, and obviously El Vampiro turns up. I'm not going to go too much into detail of the plot because these films are an absolute joy if you enjoy the vampire mythos and genre. There's some really nice little camera tricks. Again, the mist and fog is just heavy in the air. Again, it does have that Mario Bava, not a lot of money, but just tons of atmosphere. I suppose to a certain extent the same with Hammer films as well. Germán Robles as the vampire, he's got a thin face. He is kind of, handsome. Perhaps he doesn't have that kind of menace behind his eyes. Obviously Christopher Lee kind of encapsulated that animalistic. He's a much more, don't want to say genteel vampire, but he's much more kind of again, ethereal is probably not the right word either, but he's still effective. And again, it's just such a great wee film. But again, the atmosphere, the cinematography is just, as I said, absolutely gorgeous. Mendes has a real eye for composition, and the black and white cinematography on this 4K print, it just absolutely jumps off the screen. I can't imagine a 4K actually looking better than the Blu-ray does. And then we have El Atod Vampiro, or the Vampire's Coffin, again with 4 returning actors playing the same character. So we've got Abel Salazar again, who is a doctor, Adriana Velter playing the niece, and Germán Robles playing El Vampiro. So this literally follows on a little bit after the events of the first film. So we witness a couple of grave robbers who for some reason break into the old house, into the crypt, and steal the vampire's coffin. And it turns out one of them is a doctor colleague of Abel Salazar, the doctor from the first film, who off-puttingly looks a little bit like Jean-Pierre Melville with hair. So it's quite off-putting. It's like, did Jean-Pierre Melville have hair and spend some time in Mexico playing in horror films? It's like, no, but he's not Jean-Pierre Melville, he just looks a bit like him. So he wants to find out the vampire myth, which when Salazar finds out, he's obviously not that happy. The niece is in the hospital just recovering from the first film, and then here's his colleague bringing the vampire's corpse into the hospital to do research on vampirism. Probably not the best idea in the world. He might have to take a visit to human resources, whereas everybody's a human resource to El Vampiro. Needless to say, he had a low-level criminal helping him with the grave robbing, and he sees the Count's nice jewellery around his neck, so of course he removes something that's in the Count, and of course that brings the Count back from the dead, and then he uses the thug as his sidekick, as vampires tend to do. And then strangely enough, he wants vengeance on the people that did him dirty in the first film, and then all hilarity ensues. So this one is less gothic because it's in the hospital, it's in the city, but it's actually, it also kind of works as a nice difference from the gothicness of the first one. So there's wonderful shots of El Vampiro chasing young women down the streets, and it's just lit absolutely beautiful. It's almost like third man lighting along city streets. Again, because of the continuity of actors and characters, it just feels so natural. You're back amongst friends. Again, it's just hugely enjoyable. You know, these ones are 84 and 82 minutes, but they just fly by because they're just so well done, so well shot. And again, it's a nice kind of change up from the really gothic, misty elements of the first film to a more urban setting of the second film. You know, the second film's not quite as good as the first film, but they're both absolutely wonderful. And I would, as I said, I would highly recommend you get your hands on this set as soon as possible, because this one probably will fly off the shelves. So as I said, this is a 2K scan, but it still looks marvellous. Memories of a Storyteller from 2024 is a 22-minute piece by Juan Ramon Obon. Shares stories about the life and career of his esteemed father, the prolific screenwriter Ramon Obon, who wrote this film, strangely enough. The Great Mexican Vampire from 2024, which is a 20-minute piece by Roberto Cora, who discusses Germán Robles and the representation of the vampire myth in Mexican cinema, which is excellent. And From the Drawing Board 2024, for 15 minutes, film historian and curator Elisa Lozano examines the work and impact of revered artist and production designer Gunther Garzezo. That's probably not his name. And you get the original trailer. This is a world premiere on Blu-ray. So when this was announced, I was so excited because I'd already seen El Vampiro, but the DVD copy that I had wasn't great, the print, whereas this print is absolutely gorgeous of both films. So I'd highly recommend getting your hands on this one. Obviously only if you like vampire films. If you don't like vampire films, there's not much point in buying it. This is spine number 397 and 398. But absolutely wonderful, and a lovely yellow cover as well. So that's Indicator's spooky October releases. Obviously Radiance have a bunch of spooky October releases coming soon, but Indicators are rather wonderful. So please let me know if you've seen any of these films and what you think of them while you'll be picking these sets up. And hopefully join me again for more episodes of In the Frame. This is Solitary Ronan from Solitary Ronan Films, saying farewell.